London in 1740 was the beating heart of an empire in the making, a sprawling, smoke-filled city of nearly 700,000 souls, already the largest metropolis in Europe. Its streets teemed with merchants, laborers, aristocrats, and criminals, all pressed together in a maze of timber, brick, and ambition. The Thames carried the world's trade through its center, while above the rooftops, church spires pierced a sky heavy with coal smoke. In this video, I use modern AI tools to bring historic paintings, engravings, and prints to life, allowing us to shift perspective, change camera angles, and move through the same scenes in ways their original artists never could. We'll step into the crowded alleys, bustling wharves, and grand squares of Georgian London, not as frozen images, but as living, breathing moments. First, I want to talk about the Thames at London Bridge. By 1740, London Bridge was still the only stone crossing over the Thames, and it looked nothing like the bare bridges we know today. This view shows the bridge from the south bank, its entire length crowded with timber-framed houses and shops, some rising 4 or 5 stories high. The structures lean toward each other, creating a dark tunnel-like passageway, barely wide enough for 2 carts to pass. Above the roofline, church steeples and the dome of St. Paul's rise in the distance, hazy through wood smoke and river mist. On the bridge itself, life never stops. Shopkeepers call out from doorways selling fabric, pins, books, and remedies. Wagons loaded with wool bales and coal sacks inch forward, their wheels grinding against cobblestones. Pedestrians weave between horses, dodging puddles of mud and filth. The air smells of tar, fish, and human waste. London Bridge sits above one of the foulest stretches of the river, where refuse from the city above pours into the current below. But there's danger here. The buildings are old, many dating back centuries, and fire is a constant threat. Timber frames dry as kindling, chimneys leak sparks, and once a blaze starts in this crowded corridor, there's nowhere to run. The bridge is also a bottleneck. Carts break axles, arguments erupt, and pickpockets work the crush with practiced ease. Beneath the arches, the river churns violently through narrow openings, and watermen warn passengers that shooting the bridge in a boat can be deadly. This bridge mattered because it was the gateway between the City of London and the southern roads leading to Kent and the continent. Goods, people, and news all flowed across these stones. It was commerce, connection, and chaos all at once. By the 1750s, the old medieval houses would begin to be cleared away. Concerns over fire, congestion, and structural decay finally pushed the city to dismantle the shops and dwellings. Remarkably, you can still visit the site today, though the modern London Bridge, rebuilt in the 1970s, is a stark, utilitarian structure with no memory of the medieval warren that once stood here. This view shows the Billingsgate waterfront, where the river meets the city in a chaos of boats, barrels, and bodies. By 1740, Billingsgate was London's oldest fish market, and the smell hit you long before you arrived: salt, brine, rotting fish guts, and the sour tang of the Thames itself. In the foreground, fishwives in heavy skirts and aprons haul baskets of cod, mackerel, and oysters from wherries bobbing at the quayside. Behind them, cranes lift hogsheads of wine and sacks of grain from merchant ships anchored mid-river. The scene is alive with sound. Gulls scream overhead. Fishmongers shout prices in voices hoarse from years of river air. The slap of water against hull, the creak of rope, the clatter of crates, it all blends into a roar that never fades. The air is thick with moisture and coal smoke drifting downriver from 1,000 chimneys. But Billingsgate is rough. Fights break out over stolen goods or disputed prices. The market has a reputation for foul language, so much so that Billingsgate speech becomes slang for vulgar insults. Drunken sailors stumble from nearby taverns. Beggars, some missing limbs, work the edges of the crowd. And the river itself is a hazard. Currents are strong, the water filthy, and drowning is common. This place mattered because London ate fish, and Billingsgate fed the city. On a good day, thousands of barrels of oysters alone moved through this market. It was also where news arrived. Sailors brought word from the colonies, from wars, from distant markets. The waterfront was London's ear to the world. By the 19th century, the old wooden wharves would be replaced by stone quays and covered market halls. Today, the fish market has moved to Canary Wharf, but Billingsgate Wharf still exists, a shadow of its chaotic past. By 1740, Sir Christopher Wren's St. Paul's Cathedral had been complete for nearly 30 years, its massive dome dominating the skyline like no building before it. This view shows the cathedral from Cheapside, framed by narrow streets lined with shops and coaching inns. In the midground, pedestrians and carts move through the shadow of the great church. Above, the dome rises pale and smooth, its stone still relatively clean, not yet darkened by the soot that will coat it in later decades. The streets around St. Paul's are crowded with commerce. Booksellers cluster near the churchyard, their stalls piled with pamphlets, sermons, and satires. Coffee houses buzz with debate, politics, philosophy, scandal. The air smells of roasted beans, ink, and horse dung. Bells ring out the hours from the cathedral's towers, their tones carrying across the city. But this area knows tension. The churchyard is a gathering place not just for the pious, but for the desperate. Beggars line the steps, prostitutes work the surrounding alleys after dark. And though St. Paul's symbolizes the rebirth of London after the Great Fire of 1666, the neighborhoods around it remain crowded, unstable, prone to disease. Smallpox outbreaks sweep through every few years, and the poor die in droves. St. Paul's mattered as the heart of Anglican power, a statement of national pride and architectural ambition. It was also a landmark. Anyone lost in London's tangled streets could orient themselves by the dome. The cathedral survives today, standing in much the same form, though the streets around it have changed entirely. Cheapside is now a modern thoroughfare, and the churchyard is a quiet garden, nothing like the noisy, filthy marketplace it was in 1740. This view shows Covent Garden in full swing, its open piazza filled with stalls, carts, and a river of humanity. By 1740, the market had become the city's main supplier of fruits, vegetables, and flowers, and the scene here is a riot of color and noise. In the foreground, women in linen caps sort cabbages and turnips. Behind them, flower sellers arrange tulips and roses in wooden buckets. In the background, the elegant arcades of Inigo Jones's Piazza frame the chaos, their classical columns a strange contrast to the muddy, crowded square. The smell is earthy, ripe apples, fresh herbs, and the faint stench of spoiled produce tossed into gutters. The sound is constant, haggling, laughter, the thud of crates hitting the ground. Street performers juggle and sing for coins. Sedan chairs push through the throng, their bearers shouting for space. But Covent Garden has a darker side. By evening, the market empties and the square transforms. Prostitutes appear in the arcades. Covent Garden is notorious for it. The nearby theaters draw crowds, and the taverns fill with drunks. Violence is common. The constables, few and poorly paid, can barely keep order. Disease thrives in the densely packed lodging houses nearby. This market mattered because it fed London, but it was also a social crossroads. Aristocrats passed through on their way to the theaters. Writers and artists gathered in the coffee houses on the edges of the square. It was a place where high and low culture collided. By the 19th century, the market would be reorganized, covered with iron and glass. Today, Covent Garden is a tourist destination, polished, sanitized, nothing like the rough, vital marketplace of 1740. By 1740, Wapping, on the north bank of the Thames, just east of the Tower, was the rough heart of maritime London. This view shows the waterfront from a distance, a dense line of wharves, warehouses, and taverns pressed against the river. In the foreground, ships' masts rise like a forest, brigs, slopes, and East Indiamen anchored in the Pool of London. Behind them, the rooftops of Wapping stretch into the smoky distance. The air here is different, thick with tar, hemp, and the salty smell of the sea, mixed with the rot of the Thames.
Dockhands, sailors, and riggers swarm the wharves, hauling crates of sugar, tobacco, and tea from ships' holds. Chandlers sell rope, canvas, and hardtack. The noise is industrial, hammering, sawing, shouting in a dozen languages. But Wapping is rough. Fights break out over stolen goods or disputed prices. This pirate country, execution dock where convicted pirates are hanged and left to dangle as the tide washes over them, is here. Taverns like the Prospect of Whitby cater to sailors fresh from long voyages, and brawls are nightly events. Press gangs prowl the streets, dragging men into naval service by force. Fire is a constant risk, warehouses packed with rum and gunpowder. Wapping mattered because this is where England's wealth came ashore. The ships that docked here carried the goods that made London rich: spices from India, sugar from the Caribbean,
Furs from America. This was the engine of empire. By the 19th century, the old wharves would be replaced by massive docks: St. Catherine, London, and Wapping docks. Today, most of those docks are filled in, turned into luxury apartments. But the ghost of maritime Wapping lingers in the pub names and old warehouse walls. This view shows the Royal Exchange from Cornhill, its grand courtyard buzzing with merchants, brokers, and newsmongers. By 1740, the Exchange was the financial heart of not just London, but the world. In the foreground, men in wigs and long coats cluster in groups, negotiating deals in coffee, silk, and insurance. In the background, the Exchange's arcaded courtyard rises 2 stories, its classical architecture a statement of order and wealth. The sound here is the sound of money, voices, sometimes urgent, sometimes calm, haggling over prices, arguing over contracts, spreading rumors of war or trade winds. The smell is tobacco and wool, sweat and cologne. At the center of the courtyard, a statue of Charles II looks down on the deals being struck below. But there's tension. Fortunes are made and lost in minutes. A ship sunk in a storm means ruin for some, profit for others. Speculation runs wild, trust is fragile, and though the Exchange projects stability, it sits on a web of debt, insurance, and risk. Fraud is common, arguments escalate, duels are fought over honor and money. The Royal Exchange mattered because this was where the world's commodities were traded, where empires were financed, where futures were bet on. If Wapping was where goods arrived, the Royal Exchange was where they were bought and sold 100 times before they ever left the docks. The building itself would be destroyed by fire in 1838 and rebuilt. Today, the Royal Exchange still stands, though it's now a luxury shopping arcade. The deals have moved elsewhere, to the city's modern glass towers, but the site remains a symbol of London's mercantile power. By 1740, Tyburn, at the western edge of London, near what is now Marble Arch, was the city's most infamous execution ground. This view shows the Tyburn Tree, a massive triangular gallows capable of hanging multiple prisoners at once. In the foreground, a crowd of thousands is gathered. This is spectacle, a public holiday. Some cheer, some weep, some sell pies and gin. In the background, open fields stretch toward the villages of Paddington and Marybone. The air is tense with anticipation. Prisoners arrive in carts from Newgate Prison, their journey through the streets a procession of jeers and sympathy. Some condemned men and women are drunk, given gin to calm their nerves. The smell is sweat, alcohol, and the smoke from vendors' cooking fires. When the trap drops and bodies swing, the crowd surges forward, some to mourn, some to jeer, some to grab at the corpses, believing a hanged man's hand brings luck. But Tyburn is brutal. Execution is slow, death by strangulation, not a quick drop. Families sometimes pull on the legs of the condemned to speed death.
Surgeons wait to claim bodies for dissection. And though the crowd treats it like theater, this is state violence, a warning to the poor, the desperate, the criminal. Tyburn mattered because it was where the law's power was most visible. Thousands would turn out to see a famous thief or highwayman hanged. These executions were meant to deter crime, but they often turned the condemned into folk heroes. Public executions at Tyburn ended in 1783, moved to Newgate. Today, a small plaque near Marble Arch marks the site. The fields are gone, replaced by Hyde Park and busy streets. No trace of the gallows remains. This view shows Cheapside from the east, looking toward St. Paul's, whose dome rises in the distance. By 1740, Cheapside was one of London's most busy commercial streets, lined with shops selling everything from gold jewelry to hats to medicines. In the foreground, shop fronts display their goods, fabrics draped in windows, shoes hung on hooks, signs swinging above doorways. In the midground, coaches, carts, and pedestrians jostle for space on the cobbled street. The noise is deafening, shopkeepers calling out, horses' hooves clattering, street criers selling news sheets. The smell is a mix of baked bread, roasting meat, and the ever-present stench of horse manure and open drains. At the center of the street, a stone cross once stood as a medieval landmark, though by 1740 it's long gone, destroyed during the Civil War. But Cheapside is also a place of risk. Shops are burglarized at night, fires spread quickly through the tightly packed buildings, and during times of unrest, food shortages, political tension, mobs form here. The street's prosperity makes it a target. Cheapside mattered because it was the spine of London's retail trade. If you wanted something, you came here. It was also a stage. Royal processions, Lord Mayor's shows, and public celebrations all passed down Cheapside. The street was identity, economy, and spectacle rolled into one. By the 19th century, Cheapside would be widened and modernized. Today, it's still a major street in the City of London, lined with offices and chain stores. Nothing remains of the old shop fronts, but the name and route survive. By 1740, Smithfield, just north of the city walls, was London's main livestock market, a vast open space filled with cattle, sheep, pigs, and the men who drove them and sold them. This view shows the market at its busiest, with animals crowding the muddy ground and drovers wielding sticks to keep them moving. In the background, the smoke of the city rises, and the spire of St. Bartholomew's Church stands watch over the chaos. The smell is overwhelming: animal dung, sweat, blood from nearby slaughterhouses. The sound is a constant bellowing, bleating, shouting. The ground is churned to thick mud mixed with manure and straw. Butchers inspect animals, haggling over price. Drovers curse and crack whips. It's violent, messy, essential. But Smithfield is dangerous. Stampedes happen. Animals, frightened and exhausted, break loose and run wild through nearby streets. Disease spreads among animals and people. And Smithfield has a darker history. This was once a place of execution, where heretics were burned at the stake. In 1740, that memory still lingers. Smithfield mattered because it fed London. Thousands of animals passed through every week, slaughtered in nearby shambles, and sold as meat in the city's markets. Without Smithfield, London would starve. By the mid-19th century, the live market would be moved further out to Islington. Today, Smithfield is a covered meat market, still operating in Victorian buildings, though the days of live cattle in the streets are long gone. This view shows Westminster from across the river, the Houses of Parliament and Westminster Abbey rising above the muddy banks of the Thames. By 1740, Westminster was the political heart of Britain, though the buildings looked nothing like the Gothic Revival palace we know today. The old medieval palace of Westminster, damaged by fire over the years, still stood, a jumble of halls, chapels, and chambers. In the foreground, wherries ferry passengers across the river. In the background, the Abbey's towers stand tall, centuries old. The area around Westminster is chaotic. Sedan chairs carry MPs and lords through narrow streets. Lobbyists and petitioners cluster near the palace, hoping for a word with someone powerful. The smell is the Thames. Low tide exposes mud and filth. The sound is politics, arguments, rumors, the ringing of division bells. But Westminster is tense. Political factions clash. Bribery and corruption are routine. The government is unstable, and the king, George II, is often at odds with Parliament. Mobs sometimes gather outside, angry over taxes or war. Power here is precarious. Westminster mattered because this was where laws were made, where wars were declared, where the fate of an empire was decided. It was the center of British authority, and every decision made here echoed across the world. The old palace would burn in 1834, replaced by the current Gothic structure. Westminster Abbey, however, survives much as it was. Today, this area remains the seat of government, though the world around it has changed beyond recognition. By 1740, the Fleet Ditch, once the River Fleet, had become an open sewer running from Hampstead down to the Thames. This view shows it near Holborn, a narrow, sluggish channel choked with filth. In the foreground, waste floats on the surface, dead animals, rags, human excrement.
The banks are lined with ramshackle buildings, tenements leaning over the water. In the background, a stone bridge crosses the ditch, pedestrians hurrying across, handkerchiefs pressed to their faces. The smell is unbearable: rot, decay, sulfur. Even Londoners, used to bad smells, avoid the Fleet Ditch if they can. The sound is the buzz of flies, the drip of waste from overhanging privies, the occasional splash as something is tossed in. But the Fleet Ditch is more than disgusting. It's deadly. Disease breeds here: typhus, dysentery, cholera. The ditch is a vector for all of them. The people living in the tenements above are the poorest in the city, trapped in conditions that slowly kill them. The Fleet Ditch mattered as a symbol of London's failures, its inability to manage growth, to provide sanitation, to care for its poorest citizens. It was a physical reminder of the cost of urban life. By the 1760s, the Fleet Ditch would be covered over, paved, and turned into a street. Today, the River Fleet still flows, but deep underground in a hidden network of tunnels. Farringdon Road and New Bridge Street run above it. Most Londoners never think about what's beneath their feet. London in 1740 was a city of extremes: wealth and poverty, grandeur and filth, ambition and desperation. Walking its streets, you would have seen empire in the making, but also the cost of that empire, the crowding, the disease, the violence. The Thames carried the world's trade, but it also carried waste. The markets fed the city, but they were also breeding grounds for crime and sickness. What strikes me most looking at these scenes is how close the past feels. The street names survive. The river still flows. Some buildings, St. Paul's, Westminster Abbey, remain anchors in a city that has rebuilt itself 100 times over. And yet, the London of 1740 is also utterly foreign, a world without clean water, without streetlights, without safety. If there's another city, another moment in time, or another scene you'd like me to reconstruct and bring to life, let me know in the comments. I love exploring these lost worlds, and your suggestions help shape what we look at next. Again, thank you so much.